Welcome. My name is Shelley Knipe, and I'm with the League of Women Voters of Thurston County. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization, neither supporting or opposing candidates or parties. Our mission is to defend democracy and empower voters. Tonight, we are pleased to partner with the JOLT to produce this event to inform the voters of Olympia and Tumwater of a ballot measure. On April 25th, there'll be a special election on the formation of the Olympia Tumwater Regional Fire Authority. This forum is intended to educate voters on that ballot measure by providing pros and cons. The League itself does not make any recommendation. We are an organization that, although we are the League of Women Voters, we're open to anyone, any genders over the age of 16, and we have several male members, including Danny Stusser, who will take over and moderate this forum.
Thank you, Shelley. Welcome, everyone. There's about 50 people in the room. There's an unknown number of people watching this on Channel 77, and an even less known number of people watching this on video on demand at tcmedia.org. So we're trying our best to make this a democratic process, one that's open to the public, and I'm grateful for your attention tonight. Well, let me start. I'm Danny Stusser with the JOLT News Organization. We publish the Journal of Olympia, Lacey, and Tumwater, the JOLT. We've been publishing original local news stories for almost 3 years here. Like the League of Women Voters, we're a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. I sometimes think that the League of Women Voters and we have virtually the same purpose, which is to promote democracy, government transparency, and in addition to that, we want to help people know where the best events are every weekend. So that's my commercial for the JOLT. You probably won't hear another one tonight, except to say that it's at thejoltnews.com. I'd like to start by thanking our host, Thurston Community Media, which has made its studio and its technologies and its worldwide network of avionics and control systems all available to us tonight. And there's a lot to be said for a community that has a television station like this that both trains individuals how to use TV technology, makes time available on the air, and it's a great resource, and I'm very grateful that they're here. And of course, I want to thank the League of Women Voters. Without their involvement, this wouldn't have happened, especially the involvement of Shelley Knipe, who you just met, and Darlene Hine, who's the president of the local chapter. So what is this all about tonight? I'll tell you a little bit about it, and we have 6 speakers who will tell you more. There's an election that's officially April 25th. The ballots will go out, I understand, on April 5th, just about a week from now. The idea is that the cities of Tumwater and Olympia would divest their fire departments, spin them out of city government, and put them into a new joint organization that would be called the Olympia Tumwater Regional Fire Authority. The RFA would have its own board of directors. At first, these directors, I think they're called commissioners. At first, these commissioners would be appointed by the city councils, and then they would be elected on a staggered basis over, the early few years. Then it would be fully independent of the city governments. This board would have its own taxing authority. So in addition to creating a new structure, a new government structure, the Regional Fire Authority, the RFA would have the, I think you'd call them authority to tax properties and also to assess something called a fire benefit charge. This fire benefit charge is a fee, not a tax. It would take somebody with a higher pay grade than me to tell you what the difference is. For people who itemize their taxes, there's a difference. Otherwise, it comes on your tax bill and would come every year. The Regional Fire Authority would be funded by both the property taxes and the fire benefit charge. Some of you might be offended by the idea of talking about math tonight, but we're going to be doing a little bit of talking about math. If you like math, you might not like history. We're also going to talk a little bit about history. The history of the Regional Fire Authority, some people think, started in 2019 when the city of Tumwater hired a consultant to consider various aspects of how to improve fire service. The consultant recommended creating a regional fire authority. It didn't specify exactly who would be in the regional fire authority, but the likely suspects were the ones that were right next door, because in order to support each other, fire departments need to be contiguous. Tumwater and Olympia are largely contiguous. Near where I live, the map looks like a checkerboard. Every other house is Tumwater or Olympia, and without a map and a database, you can't tell which is which. So this didn't really start in 2019. It didn't start in 2020 or even 2021 when the fire authority, what was the formal name of it? The Regional Fire Authority Planning Committee, thank you, was formed in 2021. Started meeting in August 2021. That wasn't the start either. From where I stand, this started in 1999 when an initiative, statewide initiative, went to the voters and it passed. The initiative was one that changed state law so that property taxes can increase, collections on property taxes can increase by only 1% per year on a particular property. Anybody want to dispute that? Because it's a very complicated thing to talk about what 1% means. Obviously, the cities have needed more than 1% more in property taxes each year since 2019, 2020. The way cities have increased their budgets has been by a combination of adding new properties onto the tax rolls, which brought in net new money, and by creating new kinds of funds that are spun away from local governments. This is an example of a solution to a funding problem. That's what this is about. Nobody here disputes that the population is growing and aging, and this causes the fire and emergency services departments to be put under a little bit more pressure as they serve more residents. And I think it's probably fair to say that everybody here appreciates firefighters. We love firefighters. You guys are our heroes. Thank you. Some of the firefighters are women. Most of the women I've met don't mind being called guys in a group, but I don't want to offend anybody, at least not here. So we love firefighters. What this is about is how do we pay their salaries? And there's a complicated formula involved in this fire benefit charge. I promised you there wouldn't be any more commercials for the JOLT, but in the last 15 months we've published about 18 news stories about the Regional Fire Authority. 2 of them included links to calculators, and they showed formulas both proposed and voted on. So all the details are available in the JOLT. There's also more information on Olympia Indivisible and on a couple of websites that are run by the people whose presence you have here on the stage. There are some issues that complicate this. I think you'll hear about them from the speakers. If you don't, there'll be time for questions and answers. I'd like to tell you what the agenda is for tonight. The agenda was right here in front of me. Thanks to the League of Women Voters. We'll be having presentations from the people on behalf of the proposition and people who are opposed to the proposition, pro and con. The pros will speak 20 minutes and the cons will speak 20 minutes. After that, there'll be rebuttals of 15 minutes each. You'll be glad to know that at the end of the rebuttals, there'll be a couple-minute break. Until then, please hold your questions. We'll have questions and answers after the break. Now I'd like to tell you about our speakers. The first speakers will be in favor of the proposition, and they include Lieutenant Stephen Booz of the Olympia Fire Department. He's been a member of the Olympia Fire Department for 8 years and has been on the executive board of the International Association of Firefighters, Local 468, for 7 years and currently serves as the president. Pardon me? Formerly president. He is on the right side for those of you watching this on TV. Next to Lieutenant Booz is Council Member Lisa Parsley of Olympia. Lisa was elected to seat number 5 on the Olympia City Council in 2017 and re-elected in 2021 for another term. And to her right is, I don't know your rank.
This tonight. I'm a battalion chief.
Battalion Chief Firefighter Donovan Cathy. Mr. Cathy has been a firefighter for 20 years and is an active member of the Tumwater Firefighters Union. And this little note of interest, he's the only one among these speakers who is from Tumwater. Speaking against the proposition, we have 3 speakers. This time maybe we'll go also from right to left. Pat Cole. Say hello, Pat.
Hello.
Pat served 4 years on the Olympia Planning Commission and then another 4-year term, this time on the Olympia City Council. Lately, he's been paying a lot of attention to homeless challenges in Thurston County. If you're a regular reader of the JOLT, you've seen several of his pieces in there talking about homelessness. Next to Pat is Larry Jezza. Larry has an extensive background in government finance at the federal, state, and local levels. He's taught and lectured on public administration and budgeting at the graduate level at several colleges. And to his right is Bob Jacobs. Many of you remember Bob Jacobs as being the former mayor of Olympia. He served on the Olympia City Council for 7 years, almost all of which were as mayor. It's a part-time job. In real life, his work career included 22 years as a policy and budget analyst for the states of Washington and Alaska. When Bob sent me his bio, he included these words. He said that he's an advocate for good government policies and a positive future. And I think that those words could describe everyone who will be speaking to us tonight, and probably everyone who's in the audience, either live or watching on a screen somewhere. So the clock will start now. I'm going to invite the speakers who are speaking on behalf of the proposition to begin. And I'd like to just say there's not many rules here. There's no biting and no hitting, but particularly there's no going overtime. We have a timer that all of you can see with 3-inch high letters on it. As the time drops, you'll see it count down from 20 to 19 to 18. And when there's 1 minute left, the letters turn red, and maybe they flash. There might be fireworks, I don't know. But I'd like to invite you to begin speaking right now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters for the opportunity to talk about this important measure for both our fire departments in Olympia and Tumwater, and urge you to give this serious consideration and to vote yes for this measure. So I'd like to go through this presentation tonight. Next slide, please. And if you can run the video, that'd be great.
The calls are coming so fast that people that are sick in the same area are going to have to wait for an engine coming from a far distance. And that's not how it should be happening.
If you have an engine in an area that goes on a call and another call is dispatched in the same area, that response time goes up.
When we need help, it's sometimes not us that we're relying on for help because we don't have enough resources in the places that we need them to assist us on those calls.
Regionalization brings, a sustainable funding model. We're not fighting for funds and fighting for resources.
I guarantee when somebody calls 911 that their child is drowning in the lake and they're at the point they can't save them, they don't care what we do or don't have. They are expecting that we have the resources to make that save and make a difference.
So why are we doing this? Fire and medical responses are the most critical services. They save lives and they save property. Call volume is driving response times up to unacceptable levels, taking longer for us to get from call to call. Firefighters are struggling to keep up with demand. More calls coming in. We want to go on those calls, but sometimes we can't, and it's becoming more and more difficult. Equipment needs to be replaced. We have a number of vital pieces of equipment that need maintenance on an ongoing basis, and we need that stable framework of funding to be able to make sure that those pieces of equipment work correctly. Fire and medical costs are rising fast, competing with other services. As mentioned in the opening statement, this breaks the two departments break away from the city, so they don't have to compete for other general fund dollars. And need to action before the system is broke. The cities have recognized that at some point in the near future, revenues are going to outpass expenditures, and those lines are going to cross, and we got to do something before that happens. Next slide, please. So a little timeline here. The planning committee was developed in late 2021. That was the Olympia and Tumwater city council members that were on there. Fire administration, fire chiefs, and city administration were on the panels, and our local unions. The councils approved and endorsed the plans in December of 22. Our committee was formed shortly after that, and you, the voters, will decide April 25th. Next slide. So firefighters are busier than ever. More firefighters are needed to ensure time-critical, labor-intensive, and highly technical work is delivered. Those are important things in our business. We have to be able to get there in a timely fashion, and when we get there, we have to do things quickly. We have to do our job quickly. We have to have enough people there to do the job, whether that's a single engine company that is taking care of an EMS call, or that's multiple companies taking care of more critical calls. And making sure that we're properly trained, that we have the tools and the abilities to be able to take care of that job that's in front of us. And as you can see here, population increases. Population has increased by 21%, 51% in Tumwater since 2010, and it's going to increase even more. And when those increases happen, next slide, our call volume goes up. As we get more people in our communities, that means there's more people that are going to call us for some sort of need, some sort of help. And in Olympia, over the last 12 years, it's gone up by 89%, and in Tumwater, 125%. So that just exacerbates the ability for us to respond in a timely fashion, to have enough people respond to those scenes, and being able to get there and do the job that we need to do, and to help the public like the public expects us to help them. Next slide, please. So this slide is about concurrent calls, overlapping calls, multiple calls that are happening at the same time. And right now, in 2022, about half the time in Olympia, there was 2 or more calls happening at any one time. Half the calls, that's a lot. And in Tumwater, it's a third of the time. So that just means that if there's a call in one area that is happening and another call happens in that same area, and a response unit has to respond from another response area, and those response times just go up. And in Olympia, this happens every day, half the time, every day. Next slide, please. Our minimum staffing levels. So we got to have enough people on duty every day to take care of the work that's in front of us. And in 2010, in Olympia, they had 17 folks, and in 22, they had 20, increased by 3. In Tumwater, 8 and 10. So it doesn't look like it's been keeping up with population growth. It hasn't been keeping up with responses, and it's just a minimal increase in those personnel. Next slide, please. So this diagram here on the left is just a picture of what it takes from our NFPA standards, what it takes in the initial response, what they ask us to have responding to a residential structure fire, and then a bigger building, a bigger commercial building, and then the biggest commercial building. And it takes 15 people. They want 15 people in that initial response to go to that structure fire. And so it takes a lot of people there in a short period of time to take care of work. Make sure nobody's inside. Make sure they can get their equipment in place so that they can put out the fire. And then any other work that needs to be done, people have to be there quick to do that. And as you see, bigger buildings takes just more people. And the picture on the right is just an example of a big building that caught on fire recently in downtown Olympia, an apartment building that was under construction. It was a third alarm fire. And crews got on scene quickly in Olympia. And if I remember correctly, they went to the north end, the farthest end of that picture. They go to the north end to protect that area. One, it's involved. Two, there is a multi-family building there. So there's a lot of people living in a small area just across the street from that. They put crews in that area to protect that building and to protect the people that are in those buildings. And they did. And then other crews came in. As a third alarm assignment, that is a lot of firefighters. That's a lot of units. And what that does is that then leaves a hole. It leaves a hole in Tumwater, leaves a hole in Olympia, and calls still come in. Calls still happen. Just because this is happening doesn't mean people are going to stop calling 911. And that increases our response time and just leaves holes there. Next slide, please. So what are we going to get? 18 firefighters, 18 firefighter EMTs to staff new units. That's a project that the City of Olympia started, but we are going to stand that up in the RFA. It's not happening currently, but it's going to happen in our with the RFA. So they'll stand it up. The other program that I really like is the CARES program, because it's a multifaceted program that takes care of a number of different things. And what that does is it's kind of I look at it as kind of a proactive. What we do on the fire engines, on the paramedic units every day is we react. Somebody calls and we go. This can be reactionary. So if there are people in the community that are calling multiple times over a short period of time and their needs aren't what we provide, meaning they need something different, something more, we can get this unit can get them in touch with those resources. Also can reduce the amount of calls we're having, these repetitive calls that we're having. It can also get them in touch with resources that we can't provide. Our resources are our firefighter, EMT, paramedics. We get them to emergency rooms to see emergency room doctors. They can get them in touch with other resources that doesn't necessarily mean it's an emergency room. It could be a less acute sort of care. Next slide, please. So this will allow for the plan will allow for timely replacement and upgrade of critical response, vehicles, equipment, and facilities. So we have fire trucks and medic units that are aging, and those need to continue to have maintenance and continue to stay in service as they get older. And the plan allows funding to do that. It's difficult right now for both cities to have funding to do that. This allows savings and the ability to fund those maintenance projects. We have stations that are aging. We have stations that need maintenance that our cities cannot keep up with. And the RFA has funding available to allow for routine maintenance, provisions to make it a modern workforce, electric retrofits, anything that's needed. This RFA plan allows us to do that. And then our safety gear. We all wear turnout gear. We all have SCBAs so that we can go places that other people can't go. And those things have to be maintained and they have to be replaced. And again, this RFA plan allows for those replacement and maintenance of that equipment. Next slide, please. And really, this is the biggest one, I think. It provides a stable framework for future response and growth. That's really what this is all about. It allows the fire department to merge and then be able to grow as the community grows. As responses grow, as things continue to move up, we're not looking at our cities declining in population. Our cities are growing. You go out there and you see buildings going up all over the place, both commercial, residential. That just means people want to come here and live, and I don't blame them. This is a great place to live. But this plan allows us to continue that growth. And the other part of this is transparent. Right now, the fire department budget is buried in between other general fund budgets. And if somebody wanted to go to City Hall to see what the fire department budget is, it may be a little difficult. With the RFA, it's just one funding budget. It's one thing. And you have people that are commissioners that oversee that, and it's very, very transparent. So you know exactly where your money's going. Next slide, please. So if the voters approve, you'll get more firefighters. That means better response. That means improved public outreach and public education. Big thing, right? Getting out in the community and telling people what's going on, and also fire prevention. Funding of fire trucks and equipment, the CARES program that I mentioned before, station maintenance and improvements, more efficient, save money and stable funding, and increases transparency, just what I mentioned before. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to pass it to Lisa.
Thank you. I love this quote. This quote is how we're approaching all the problems in our region: homelessness, housing, water treatment, 911, inner city transit. We are better when we work together and not as individuals. We can leverage more money for capital. For example, LOT just put in a $28 million capital improvement, which is going to improve our output into the Bud Inlet. And we did not need to go back to the voters. We did not need to increase our fees. This was a very important time when we had a 6.9% increase. Regionalization is how we're going to fix everything in our community. The fire is no different. The firefighters are the experts. The experts on this stage, the subject matter experts, are sitting beside me. This is the plan that they have come up with that will leverage what we have to build for a future, because we've seen the statistics here. We are going to grow, and we got this last night in our housing needs assessment. We are going to grow by potentially another 30% in the next 7 years, just in Olympia. This is not sustainable. We've been accused of creating a crisis. No, we're trying to avoid a crisis. It's about to hit when you see the call times going up to 9 to 11, 12 minutes, when they should be down at 6 or 7 minutes. We are trying to avoid a crisis. We're trying to build a platform upon which our community can have adequate fire safety. It's our job on council, and it's our community's job to take care of our firefighters and listen to them as they help us come forward in the plan. Next slide, please. I particularly love this quote from Mike Simmons. Yeah, he's right here. They were doing about 3,000 calls a year in 1988. Last year, our call volume increased by 3,000, from 12,000 to over 15,000 calls in last year. I'm going to relate a story that I heard for the first week of 2023 from a female woman firefighter. Their first week, first 7 days, they saw over 350 calls in the city of Olympia alone. In Tumwater, it was over 125 calls. The firefighters in our particular jurisdiction were working 24 on, 24 off due to staffing shortage. It would seem okay if you get off at 7 in the morning, you get the day, and you get up in the next morning at 7 a.m. and be there. But that's not what was happening. They were having so many calls, they weren't getting off shift until noon, 1 o'clock that day. They would have to go home, sleep, and show up at 7 a.m. and do it all over for 7 days. That's the first 7 days of 2023. We are trying to avoid a crisis. The 6 of us that met in the subcommittee asked the hard questions. We pushed the plan to the point where our community would expect us to as subcommittee members, and we voted 6-0 to bring this to our councils. Every single one of us are proud of this plan, and we had at our side the subject matter experts, the firefighters, to tell us this is what we need to do to provide adequate fire safety in our 2 cities in the future and for the future populations. Next slide, please. Can you play the video?
Some of the issues happening right now at our fire department have a lot to do with the fatigue that our firefighters are experiencing.
The line personnel are the individuals that are responding to these emergencies. The men and women that are showing up each and every day are continuing to try and do more with less, and it's causing quite a strain.
Our budget hasn't kept up with the demand of our communities.
Unfortunately, I think it would take a major injury or death for a firefighter or first responder to get the change that we need.
This RFA plan allows for us to properly fund our department in a way that it can keep up with growth.
Any money that comes to the fire department goes directly back into the fire department. It truly becomes the fire department that the community wants.
Like, I don't even want to know what it's going to be like in 10 years if this RFA doesn't pass. Like, what is the Olympia Fire Department going to look like in the next 5 to 10 years? Nobody knows.
So that ends our presentation. I urge you to visit our website for more information, and I'd urge you, we have an email address on that website. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to chat with you. If there's any groups that want us to come out and talk with you about this plan, we'll be happy to come out and chat with you. And we just urge you to support this plan and support and vote yes on April 25th. Thank you.
And now let's hear from the people who are opposed to this ballot proposition.
Good evening. I'm Bob Jacobs. I'm very pleased to be here in support of the campaign to save our fire departments. On the web at saveourfd.org. Saveourfd.org. My job this evening is to provide some introductory remarks and then turn it over to Pat Cole for our presentation. First, thank you to our sponsors, the League of Women Voters of Thurston County and JOLT News. By sponsoring this forum, they are supporting democracy in an important way. Democracy depends on informed voters, not just voters, informed voters. This is especially important in this case because the sponsors of this initiative allowed very little time for everyone to become informed on this very complex issue. Thanks also to our medical and fire responders and all their support staff. None of us know when our lives may literally be in their hands. On a personal note, my wife and I have had occasion to call for both medical and fire assistance. We've been very pleased with the professionalism of the responders who helped us when we needed them. The Save Our Fire Departments campaign presenter this evening is Pat Cole. Pat and I served together on the Olympia City Council. Pat is a very smart and well-informed guy. I respected him even when we were on different sides of a few issues before the council. He also worked as a senior project manager for Sunset Air for many years, overseeing HVAC installations in major facilities like large office buildings and schools. This put him in contact with people all over the area. He's very well connected in the community. Our technical expert is Larry Jezza. Larry is a consummate researcher and analyst. He attended most of the meetings where Proposition 1 was developed and has immersed himself deeply in its details. I've just been watching him shuffle his cards here. I've never seen anything like this. Larry will help with any detailed questions that arise. Pat, you're up.
Thank you, Bob, and thank you for that kind introduction. So we'll see. Yes, my name is Pat Cole. I'd like to thank the League as well for having this forum and the opportunity to talk about the RFA and represent the position vote no on Prop 1. I'd like to say a little bit about our group working on that. We feel that we have a tremendous amount of expertise on this. We have Larry, as you know, as a professional budget analyst. We have a longtime Olympia resident economist who is internationally known and has been involved in civic issues as long as I have, which goes back to 1978. And we have a number of city council members endorsing this, and Bob and I. And so we feel that we really understand civic funding. We've been supportive of the fire department. Next, please. Excuse me, this is asthma, it's not COVID. It's asthma and allergies. I think a lot of us are dealing with allergies right now. The alders are out. But we've long supported our community. We've long supported the fire department. And we actually feel we're here to help. That's what we're trying to do, because we think there are much better solutions to help with these issues that have been brought up. And the problem, if the problem is needing more firefighters, then this proposal absolutely will not help. What's before us is a large increase on our property tax bills. It's actually historically the largest increase either Tumwater or Olympia has put on the property tax bills, even though it's a fee, much larger than the parks measure that has been passed a couple of times. So there's a lot of money, and I think that the first point I'd like to make is what we're not getting, is we are not getting new firefighters. We are not getting new equipment. We are not getting more fire stations. We've looked at the budget. It took a lot of work to do that. We had to use a public records requests to get the information, to get the spreadsheets. So this is not in the RFA. This is not what we're buying. I would think this would be high on the priority list, but evidently it is not, which adds up to, as far as we're concerned, no improvements in service. So what are we getting? What is in the RFA? Well, first of all, there are a lot of administrative positions. These are positions in my business world, we would call them overhead because they're not providing the service. We have finance and accounting, human resources, IT, public information. These are redundant positions. These positions already exist in both cities. What is not paid for by the RFA, which has been mentioned, is the CARES, which stands for Citizen Advocates for Referral and Education Services, and BLS, which is Basic Life Support. Now, these two programs, Olympia is already pursuing. They've passed ordinances. They've directed their staff to pursue them. They are hiring for them. And they're good programs. You know, we're fully supportive of these programs. Excuse me. But we're calling it the 18 new firefighter myth, because what we're hiring are, first of all, they're EMTs, which do have firefighter certs, but they're hired to be part of the basic life support system. They also are not funded by the RFA. All the RFA does is repay back a loan from the city of Olympia so they can get the program started. But that is, oh, next slide, please. So I changed mine. I have to say next slide, please. Thanks, sweetie. Sweetie, my wife is in the audience, so I didn't mean you, but thank you. But it's important to realize that Olympia is already going through with the program. It's a good program, but they're also designed to be self-funded. The CARES program is designed to be funded by federal reimbursements. The basic BLS life support is scheduled to be funded by insurance, co-pays, and grants. So these are to be self-funded, which is why they're not actually paid for by the RFA. So what else is as a part of it? So we also, next slide, please. Oh, she got it. So if I change them, you can change them. All right. The fire benefit charge is only the initial cost. As I mentioned before, it is the largest increase on the property tax bill, and it's called a fee. And it's called a fee for two reasons, which were, the enabling legislation called it that. But it does two things. One is it can be raised without a vote. And as we run the numbers, it can be raised up to $40 million without a vote. It is not constrained by the 1% limit on property taxes, unlike other. And for residential homes, since it is not a tax, it's also not tax deductible on your income tax. For the money that we're spending on overhead, what we're calling overhead, for the excess of $2 million for duplicate positions, we could hire 12 new firefighters, or we could get 2 new fire engines every year. To us, this seems like a much more useful and beneficial use of the money, that if we were designing a program, we would start from looking at what we could do and the resources that we need. There are better uses for it, for the money that we have. In addition, the FBC, the charge is flawed and it's unfair. It's what we call regressive, meaning that it taxes people, charges people with the least ability, the most money. We've run the numbers. Larry has gone into the spreadsheets. He can talk more about this, but he's gone to the actual formulas in the spreadsheets and run the numbers on there and found that apartment buildings will pay more, as well as smaller houses, than the largest houses. That means renters who are in these buildings are going to pay more because typically costs are passed along when landlords have more costs. I think that's a reasonable assumption. Costs are going up, and considering all the effort that we're doing regionally to try to address affordable housing, this seems to be directly contradictory to all these other efforts that we were doing. With respect to the region, we do have good regional programs, and when they're set up, they have been good. But this is not one of them. This is a program between two cities, Olympia and Tumwater. In fact, Fire District 3 in Lacey was approached. They were sent the same information. Next slide. Oh, it didn't. Here it comes. Here it comes. They saw the same information that we did. And they looked at the same information. They concluded from the findings after detailed review that it didn't have any apparent impacts, any benefits to their population. It didn't seem that the associated costs were going to increase services. They saw it the same way. Fire District 3 saw it the same way that we did. This is from a letter they sent in 2020. So in August. So it's fairly recent. They're working off the same documentation we are. Another problem with the RFA that we need to avoid is the riskiness. Now, we agree that these are crucial services. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, and we have tremendous amount of respect for the fire departments. So we don't want to risk them. We don't want something to happen to them. And this fire benefit charge will need to be reauthorized in 6 years. And so once we go to this form of new government, and that's basically what it is, it's a new government. Once we go to this, we're going to have to reauthorize it. Well, the Thurston Regional Fire Authority just went through this. They lost 2 levies. They've just closed 2 fire stations. We think that the risk alone is not worth pursuing the RFA. That's why we call Save Our Fire Departments, because it's so important to be looking at that and looking at all these points. So we recognize as well that the cities have huge budgetary concerns. We've been there. Bob and I have been there. A number of our endorsers have been on either the Tumwater or Olympia City Council. We notice that part of what's driving that is that the fire departments, the costs of those are going up faster than population and inflation. So that puts a lot of pressure. We realize that puts a lot of pressure on the fire departments. What it does, though, is that part of the reason that this is a stable framework for growth and will be called sustainable is because of the fire benefit charge can be raised, and it can be raised in order to keep whatever has to happen, whatever they may want to need. In fact, I was at Rotary talking about this the other day, and Pete Komet mentioned that they're already in need of another fire station. They're already looking at that. Well, there's no other fire station in the RFA. There's no other fire engines to fund it. There are no other fire trucks. There are no other firefighters to staff it. So right out the gate, there's going to be pressure to raise the fire benefit charge. We're already seeing that. There are other choices. And what I want to point out is there are other choices. The cities have choices on other things to do besides start an entire new government agency or put a new fee on our property tax charges, whether they do it with a levy lift, look at another one of the tax structures for doing that. And more importantly, I think the onus becomes on the city to provide us with a proposal that says this is what we're going to get and this is what we're going to get for our money that's specifically going to address the concerns that were brought up. What we're going to get for our money, we're winding up with, is higher costs. We're not getting improved services because we're not getting more firefighters or trucks or fire engines or fire stations. We're getting less efficiency. We're having more overhead, more administrative costs. In my world, more overhead means less efficient by definition. The fee structure is regressive and unfair, and there's more risk to our fire departments. This is what we're getting. For these reasons, we don't think that this is the right choice to make to protect our firefighters, to protect our fire departments, and to provide them the support that they need. So when we say no, what we're doing is we're telling the city council, go back, come back to us with a reasonable proposal. At a minimum, let's get the CARES program and the BLS up and running. This may take, a lot of the calls that we have are not fire calls. This is very analogous to what the city of Olympia has already done with what they call the, I got my note there, you helped me last time with this, the CRU, the Crisis Response Unit. So in Olympia, to help the police department, what they've done is they've put in a new organization, a new department under the police department called the Crisis Response Unit that are better equipped and better trained to respond to what are called community care calls. This becomes a less expensive and more appropriate response, and that in turn frees up the police officers to respond to the calls that really need their attention. Well, that's what the CARES and BLS will do for us, and we need to implement them. And we need to tell the city governments, both of them, to come and put together, if you do need more money, tell us how it's really going to help. Tell us that we're going to get some more firefighters. Tell us why we're going to do that, and tell us how the money will solve the problem. But again, we don't see that this proposal does that with the higher costs, the higher risk, the no hiring of firefighters. So, and again, go to our website. There's a lot of data there. There's a lot of information.
Videos too.
Yeah, and there's yes, and there are videos too. We don't have the pretty videos, but we do have videos, and so mostly of people talking about it. And so you'll get to see the elected officials, people at these meetings, talking about what this thing is, and so you can hear it in their own words, which we think is appropriate. So thank you, and I'll turn that over to Larry if there's anything you'd like to add.
Well, yeah, there's a few things, yes. I'll just say it simply, RFA is a bad idea being implemented badly. Oh, can you hear me now? It's inconsistent with the values that we hold as a community. As we talked about, it's regressive. And I reached this conclusion after looking at it deeply. For example, we would have a formula where bigger buildings and more expensive houses pay less per square foot than smaller ones. $1 million house, and this is real data I looked at, $1 million house in Olympia would see its Olympia tax bill increase by 15%, while a house half that size, valued at $378,000, would see a 38% increase in their Olympia tax bill. More than double the percentage increase for a house twice its size and nearly 3 times its value. And apartments, especially those smaller ones, most likely to be locally owned and managed, are charged 8 times more per square foot than large corporate out-of-state apartments. And you know landlords will pass those costs on to their tenants. So I applied 2 standards. One is we need to make sure that we need to ask ourselves, is this really needed for a safer community, which we all want? And if so, is it being done in the best way possible? And unfortunately, the answer is no. Is it needed? The first question. A key indicator is emergency response times. And it turns out in Olympia, they're actually good. What the proponents say, if confronted with the data, is, yeah, but it might be getting worse in the future. Well, here's the evidence. A statement by Tumwater Fire Chief Hurley last April said, quote, both agencies, Tumwater and Olympia, currently have response times that exceed stated goals. Medic One has data that shows in their reports that we're actually meeting the targets and exceeding the targets for advanced life support. We're also hitting our targets and exceeding our targets for basic life support as well. And we have a better, Tumwater and Olympia have a better set of measures than any other Thurston County firefighter jurisdiction. So it ain't broken. And it doesn't need to be fixed if it's not broken. And there's a lot of risk if we try to fix it in the way that there's being proposed, because a lot of the ways they're proposing is not very well thought out or very well documented. Okay, what we were saying is that this is a powerful new financial tool. The consultant admitted that. That's the real reason for it. It's really about financing, not about efficiencies from joining 2 fire departments. Look, if we needed more money, we have a way to do it, and a less risky way of doing it. Councilmember Jim Cooper said at an RFA meeting, quote, I think that the scenario we didn't run the numbers for from the beginning was both cities could go to the voters with a simple majority for a levy lid lift to operate their fire departments at a rate of revenue they need to do the job. And we could administratively merge the departments through an interlocal agreement between the two cities without doing a fire benefit charge. And I've been saying that from the beginning. But they didn't listen. The group moved on the agenda, and they never came back to his point. Let's talk about done badly. Right now, if you go to the fire benefit charge calculator that the RFA has put up there, you'll find mistakes in there that were identified by a consultant that they hired to verify the numbers. They're charging things. Oh, the Black Lake Apartments, for example, they show data of 15,000 square feet. The real data is 283,000 square feet. They are charging the Evergreen Christian Center, which should be exempt from taxes, is supposed to be exempt by law. They're charging them in the RFA calculator. You can go there tonight and put the numbers in, go to our website, and you can find out what the code is for that, what the property parcel number is for that, and see it yourself. It's been implemented in a rushed way. They were trying to make the deadline for this April election. And they made a lot of mistakes along the way. I have a long list of them, too long to discuss even in if I had the full 20 minutes. It's problematical that they have pushed this forward in a slapdash way. If this was a vehicle, it would have a factory recall. And I'm suggesting that we should vote it down and save our fire departments. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the 20 seconds you added to our question and answer period. Now it's time for rebuttals. And without further ado.
Thank you. I'll take a stab at the rebuttal. I just want to say thank you to Donovan and Lisa for giving our presentation for the pro side of the Prop 1 Vote Yes RFA. My rebuttal this evening is going to come out of frustration. I'm frustrated that our opposition believes that they know more about our jobs than we do. Not once has our opposition attempted to reach out to come and do a ride-along at any one of our fire departments. Not once have they reached out to any of us to ask questions about what our unmet needs are. The fire department isn't the same as it was in the 90s when several of our opposition members were in city council and mayors. Things have changed. They're not the same as they were 30 years ago. I'm frustrated that our opposition is using the slogan of save our fire departments when that's what our side is actually trying to do. You say you're attempting to help us, but you're actually hurting us. I am offended that our opposition has taken the stance that greed and pay raises is the only reason our two great unions have endorsed this RFA campaign. I'm offended that our opposition is using the catchphrase manufactured crisis to describe the problems that we have faced and are facing on a daily basis in our fire departments. Our opposition claims that the formation of this regional fire authority will bring no improvements in services to our communities, and that is false. They claim that there will be no new firefighters, fire stations, or fire engines in the plan of this RFA. Currently, the Olympia Fire Department is behind on maintenance and modernization of 3 of their 4 buildings, and is behind on replacement of 3 of its 5 apparatus. This is due to the inability to properly fund the reserves that pay for these things. And the longer we wait to replace and maintain all of these, the more expensive it's going to get. This is where the RFA funding model comes to our rescue. The RFA budget plan has identified that there are 9 reserve accounts that will be fully funded if the new fire department is formed. Of these 9, 2 of them are apparatus replacement and facility maintenance. The plan for the RFA clearly shows that 2 fire engines will be replaced in 2025 using these reserve funds. No new firefighters? The plan for regionalization also states the benefit is adding 2 new aid unit response vehicles, with that coming 18 new firefighters. As we've said, yes, that plan has been in place from Olympia prior to this RFA plan happening. But so far, none of those 18 firefighters have been hired. And considering that it takes 4 to 5 months to train a new firefighter, they won't be on the line before the RFA happens if the vote's successful. Our opposition claims that the fire benefit charge amount can be increased by up to 250% without the vote of the people, and that the benefit charge is something that is unheard of. Currently, there are 13 fire authorities in the western half of this state that use this form of collection for their budgetary needs, and none of them have gone on to bankrupt any of their communities. And even so much as recently, one of our opposition members was in favor of manically increasing levy rates to help fund the fire department. But now all of a sudden they take issue with manic increases in a way to form our budget. The opposition is boldly claiming that Lacey has refused to join the RFA. Lacey said no thanks to this RFA plan 12 months prior to us even forming an interlocal agreement between our two fire departments. I'm going to give you some stats from my side too. Lacey Fire District 3 and the current Olympia Fire Department are the same size. We have 4 staff stations, we have a similar population, and an almost identical annual call volume. Does anybody in the room know what Lacey's annual operating budget is this year? It's $34 million. City of Olympia is 18. That's a $16 million difference. You want to know what they get for that money? They get 3 additional response vehicles and 6 additional firefighters at minimum every single day of the week. They also have modern and state-of-the-art buildings that they work out of, and they have programs that benefit their communities that our department could only dream of right now. So I'll take a stab at why Lacey isn't here. It's because they don't need to be. The opposition is also using fear tactics that we're going to have a bumpy first 3 to 5 years. And they're trying to imply that there's going to be some form of disruption to emergency services that our two departments can provide if formed. The RFA will not be closing any fire stations. We're not going to be laying anybody off. We're not going to be shutting down any response vehicles. And the RFA will still be a part of any local or regional emergency management plans that are already in place, and if anything, will provide a better response in the event of a major catastrophe. I'm going to close my rebuttal with this. Your firefighters are overworked. They're experiencing high levels of occupational burnout, physical and mental fatigue, and it all stems from the rapid growth in our call volumes with no additional help. Our unions have endorsed this campaign and taken a very active role in helping it pass because it's something that we believe in. We believe that this is the single best plan to improve the services that we can give to our communities and that they deserve and expect. And I encourage all of you to vote yes for Proposition 1 on April 25th.
What's the next procedure? We go next?
No. There's 9 minutes left on
I
the
see.
rebuttal. If you'd like to relinquish your time, you may, or we'll add it to the questions and answers.
Yep, we'll add it to the questions.
Okay, and we'll that now move to
Can we do the rebuttal?
the rebuttal.
You want to start or you want me to start?
Let me start with a couple things because mine are a little more. You have more. You're the numbers. Larry is. I don't think anybody knows the numbers and how this thing is put together better than Larry does. You know, so I'll start just a little to speak to this idea of transparency because we've heard that it's more transparent. I've gone to Olympia's website. It's not hard to find the budget. It's just not. Finding out about this RFA took a tremendous amount of effort. It took public records requests. There are spreadsheets, documents to go through. This is anything but transparent. We have spent a lot of time, and fortunately, we have ex-professionals in budgeting and economics who know how to, fortunately, Larry knows how to do this and go through these things so that we understand the formula, so that we know it is. But it is far from transparent. What's transparent now are our local governments. It's easy to find out where they are. Frankly, it's easy to contact our local governments. I do it. We've all done that. It's not that hard. What's before the voters is not how to fight fires. I'm sorry, but that's not what we're voting on. What we're voting on is how to support the fire department in an economical way, to listen to what they have to say and figure out the best way to do it. That is something we have expertise on. That's something that we know a lot about because we've been there. We've been the ones who've had to fund you. We've been at the table. We've had to do the budget analysis. That's where our expertise is. And because of that, we can understand what's in the RFA. And because of that, we know that there are much better ways to do what you want done. I would also point out that you will not see greed anywhere on our website. We didn't talk about the pay raises during our presentation. I will point out, though, that that is a significant portion of the RFA, just so that you know about it. First, Tumwater Department has to be brought up to Olympia's pay scale. And then since we have a larger fire department, the entire department has to be brought up because pay is based on what are called comparables. And so there's significant money in the RFA for raises. Now, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, we'll leave that up to you. We'll leave that up to the voters to decide if that should be our priority. We happen to think we have higher priorities and that there are other reasons. Larry can talk about some of the other RFAs that we've looked at. And I would add one other point having to do with our experience and fees and ordinances that we pass. When I was on the city council, it was imperative to take a look at an ordinance for what could happen, for what was in the ordinance, not for what somebody said might happen, not for a pretty picture that they brought us, not for not for, oh, we wouldn't do this, not for a story. You have to look what's in the ordinance, because what's in there, what is allowed, might be what you get. This ordinance allows the fund to go up as high as $40 million administratively without a vote. Will they go to $40 million? I don't know this. But I do know that I personally would not write an ordinance that allowed that, because it might be what we get. And if that's what we get, then we can't complain because we knew ahead of time. And we're not going to be there. We're not going to be there. But the rest of us and our kids are going to be there, and everybody else is. So it's a poor way. That's the way it's written. And for us, it's risky.
Yeah. So
okay, I'm done. Anyway, thank you. Sorry. I couldn't.
Okay, and I'll try not to overwhelm you with science and math.
If you know Larry, wish him luck.
But I'll start with the number, 2%. 2%, what is 2%? 2% are the number of fire calls that the city of Olympia responds to. Well, what's the other 98%? Well, you see everything here is fire trucks, right? The fire issue is 2% of the workload of the calls that come in to the city of Olympia. It's 4% for the city of Tumwater. We're talking about emergency medical services here, and we're talking about the way we deliver it. We're talking about a fire benefit charge, which is an incredibly powerful revenue tool. I get why people want it. As a budgeteer, I would have loved to have something like that in my agencies when I was working as budget director. But there's a reason why those things aren't available easily. It requires a 60% vote of the public repeatedly in order to establish it. Once you vote it, you got to vote on it again in 6 years, because the legislature in its wisdom said this is too powerful of an instrument just to let out in the wild without controls by the public. Now, here's a difficult problem here, is that the voters are not going to have a chance to actually get a majority of voters voted on the board. The representatives on the board, you have to wait till 2028 before the public gets a chance to select who's going to be on the RFA board. They're appointed from the city council members. Until then, they gradually become, and they don't become a majority until 2028. And that's where this is an important part of what we talk about democracy here. A powerful revenue charge with a group of people who are not elected to do that function. Okay, second point, I'm sorry you're offended. You made up words that we didn't say, and so maybe you should go back and listen to them. Maybe you'll feel better about us. I hope you would. Lisa, you talked about the issue of a manufactured crisis. But in your own presentations today, you talked about trying to avoid it becoming a crisis. If you call it a crisis today and you say you're trying to avoid the crisis, you can't have it both ways. It's either a crisis today or you're trying to avoid a crisis. And what I've heard and what I've seen and my own data shows, it's not at a crisis level. That's not what Medic 1's about. If you're trying to avoid a crisis, let's have a conversation about that and find out the best way, the most cost-effective way, and the less risky way to actually avoid that crisis, should it be coming. And there are alternatives to that, many alternatives to it. We can work together. We work together right now, by the way. Right now, we have automatic mutual aid and mutual aid arrangements between all the departments and all the jurisdictions in our county. We can go even further than that. With a simple letter from the city council, we can get rid of any border issues that the 911 call center has. And let's talk about 911 calls. I mean, calls are interesting stats. They're a good workload measure if you're running a call center. What's really important is the response for a fire department. What are the responses they go out to? There are a lot of calls that come in. They're not all worthy of a response. They don't get responses, and that's known. So focusing on the number of calls, not the best measure. And during COVID, we know the data has been skewed. I spoke with the 911 people, and they said, yes, the numbers are very, very different now post or during 2022 and 2021 because of the COVID calls, related calls. And so there's a lot of noise in that data. I want to quote something over here, talk about money, right? The consultants knew that this was a powerful financial tool that's unavailable to cities, right? But it wasn't about the efficiency. It's about the money and the extra political clout that could be leveraged over the RFA board. Again, it is in plain sight in the RFA's own documentation you can find on their websites or through public records request. On a PowerPoint early in the process, Tumwater wrote, on a PowerPoint, the advantage of an RFA is it provides a larger department with more political clout. And promotional opportunities for all employees. Yes, there are advantages here. If I was a fire union, I would definitely be in favor of the RFA if I was only concerned about my members. Certainly that makes sense. I get it, I appreciate it. It's the job of what a union is supposed to do, to look after its members. I have no grudge against that. That is the correct and proper role of a union. But when it comes from a perspective of a public taxpayer and a citizen who's concerned about the fairness of our tax system and about how much resources we actually have to contribute towards public activities, I want to make sure we're getting the best value for that dollar. And I want to make sure that I'm minimizing the risk. Let's just give you another example. I'm sorry to go off on a tangent here, but risk is part of which is what bond companies look at and assess. If we went out for a bond to build a new fire station, which is a whole other topic, and the RFA was the agency that was requesting $21 million in bond authority, those rating agencies would look at a brand new organization that has no track record of paying its bills, that's living on borrowed money, $8 million from the city of Olympia, $2 million from Tumwater, and say, well, you know what? I'm not going to give you such a good credit rating after all. Or the city of Olympia could do it and say, well, here's an organization that's been in existence for 140 years. It's probably going to be paying its dues and paying its debts. I would give it a much better rating. So just on that grounds alone, you know, when you go to the bond market, a new RFA is going to be paying a higher price for the same things than a city would be paying. Again and again, we run into the same problem of saying, what are we getting for this? A 7-year plan, a 7-year financial strategic plan, picked it apart, analyzed it. I listened to, go to the website, please, saveourfd.org, and listen to Councilmember Cooper speak in amazement and astounded that when he looked at the plan said, there's no new fire stations in here. But we know we need Olympia fire stations. We know that. Or at least you can tell us we'll have shorter response times, we'll have quicker response times. And you can see the heads, some of the people who are in this audience today, shaking their heads. No, we can't say that. We can't say that we're going to have a new fire station. We can't say we're going to reduce response times because it's not in the budget. And if it isn't in the budget, there's only one other way around it, is to take that powerful $40 to $50 million extra capacity that you have from this fire benefit charge and increase it to levels that, again, City Manager Doan from Tumwater said, we'd have to raise it up to scary levels. I think that's the problem what we have over here. We have a plan which is ill-considered, does not consider the complete needs of the city of Olympia and Tumwater. It has a huge hole in it because of a need for an annexation, the southeast annexation. We're going to add, close to 10,000 new people to the city of Olympia, and everybody knows they need a fire station in there. Everybody knows. Lisa knows they need a fire station. She said it. And she was concerned. She was concerned it was less than transparent that we weren't putting that into the financial plan for the RFA. She expressed that concern. It's on the website. You can see it, and she shares it. And yet, the response was, let's remove that from the PowerPoints in the future, the need for an annexation. Let's remove that from the PowerPoints. Okay, it's a real problem. It's a real issue. What matters in response times, the studies show, this is the 2019 report that everybody talked about that started the RFA with Tumwater and Olympia. This is what started all. It's quite a report. They say it, and it's clear. Where your fire station is and proximity to where the calls are coming from determines your response time. It kind of makes common sense, right? So you need to have your fire stations in the right places where where most of the calls are coming from, and you need to have enough of them located and dispersed in the proper areas so you can get there quickly. We don't have that. We need it. That's what I'm told. I believe it. We should get it. The plan, the 7-year financial plan that the RFA is proposing, doesn't have it in there. It deliberately said, we're not modeling it. We've chosen not to model that. And we know that. Leota knows it. She was there and chairing the meetings. She heard it. Thank you. And you did a great job, by the way, chairing those meetings. It is something that we need to address as a community. We need to do it for public safety. We need to do it for my family, my friends, my family, myself. We all rely on great fire safety and great emergency responsive. 98% of the time, we're going to be calling them not for a fire, but for emergency response. And we really need to get to that point where we're saying we have the resources to do it. We have a logical plan. We're spending money on the right things. It would be better to hire 12 FTEs, 12 firefighters, than it would be to hire 10 bureaucrats like I was, a budget director. Budget directors don't come cheap. We know that. Or HR directors or 3 IT people to do the work that's already being done by the cities. It is just a basic premise of efficiency. Everything in here is not an economy of scale. This merger is a diseconomy of scale, costing the voters, costing the public more money than it should for results that are completely lacking. Thank you.
Thank you both, pro and con. Some of you who might want to see a repeat of this, you're in luck. This entire presentation will be available on video on demand on Thurston Community Media, and you'll be able to go back and forth and listen to the details. For now, there's going to be a break. So everybody can stand up, stretch, and we'll be back in just a couple of minutes. Thank you. Welcome back. We have 10 questions from the audience. Some of them are a little duplicative, and I'll try to get to them all. And I'm not sure what order to ask them in. See, I'm a print reporter, not a TV guy. One of the questions, yeah, we have another question. I think this question is for the con side. Have you personally spoken to any Tumwater or Olympia firefighters about the city's underfunding the fire departments to properly perform to a national standard?
I've talked with the fire chiefs of both departments. I was the sole attendee at the town hall for the RFA at the Tumwater Fire Station, and I had a chance to talk to many of the firefighters during those meetings. And so, yes, on repeated occasions, I've had one-on-ones with the fire chiefs, and along with other staff. So, yeah, I didn't go for a ride-along, but I certainly gave them a chance to talk about what their needs are and how they're approaching it.
Thank you. Can you confirm the City of Olympia's inability to fund the basic life support transport units sustainably under the current revenue conditions?
The issue with the basic life support transport system is that we would be relying in part or in total with Medicaid, Medicare funding. And we would have to recover that. But we would also be able to recover some of the transport fees with private insurance and just billing. This is not a guaranteed funding source. And Medicare, Medicaid, that portion of Medicaid, Medicare, we're not certain it's going to be there. Cities like New York City and Chicago have figured out that this fund exists, and it would need to be recharged by the Congress to be able to get that money. So it is very possible that some of these rides in the ambulances would not be covered, and the City of Olympia, should we not pass this, will end up having to pay for this. Just to answer for the RFA, $4 of the $8 million coming from the city as a loan will pay for that $4 million stand-up, including the 18 firefighters and the 2 units, without having to worry about recovering the revenue streams that the city will have to do over 5 years. that loan will immediately be paid for by the RFA in the budget structure.
Thank you. Sure.
One of the important things here is that that BLS, that RFA proposal, is not part of the RFA. It is standalone. The City of Olympia has it. There's a separate line on a spreadsheet in the RFA budget that says City of Olympia, and it has the several $1 million of the cost for the reimbursements expected from it. And below it has a blank line that says Tumwater to be determined. And the dialogue that Tumwater had was, let's see how Olympia does with this, and we'll follow on when we can do it, but it's just too much for us to handle right now, was the response that I heard many times. So it is there. And here's the thing. If the money's not available for the City of Olympia, it's not available for the RFA either, which means that the RFA's $10.5 million increase in your property tax bill is going to have to rise to whatever that new need is. And so that's what that's about. There's nothing for free. The RFA doesn't create anything new.
Council Member Parsley.
Well, I respect Larry and his viewpoint. The loan that will be the $4 million is the repayment of that is in the budget. So that will be paid. The RFA budget is right there. The debt service for that $4 million will be going directly to pay the city back, which does pay for the BLS and CARES program.
We should have a dialogue because that repayment presumes that the federal government will be coming in because there's a long delay between the time
that actually is part of the budget, the repayment for the budget, not worrying about the recovery of the transport costs. The debt of the $4 million that pays for the BLS and CARES, the RFA is going to pay that debt back. By paying that back, regardless of recovering transport fees, they will be paying for this service.
We'll have to disagree, and we'll share the numbers later on because we enjoy looking over spreadsheets together.
Oh, yeah.
We won't get to all the questions, so I'll appreciate. This might be a quick question. Doesn't the plan, by which I think the RFA proposed budget, identify reserve funds for fire stations? Yes or no?
It identifies fire station maintenance.
Maintenance?
Yes.
There's no fire stations in the RFA plan.
Thank you. Next question. Please speak to the impact to apartment dwellers in the RFA plan.
Can whoever asked the question, can you be more specific about what impact?
Specifically on the cost, but there was a factor number, it was 1.5 as I recall, for apartments. There are 4-unit apartments, there are 400-unit apartments. For commercial businesses, I believe there were 6 levels, depending on the square footage size. It seemed like that could produce some inequity.
Well, I'll be the inequity guy here. Absolutely, it will produce a lot of inequity. It's interesting that, one of the things about Olympia downtown is that they want to have mixed-use buildings, downstairs restaurants and offices and things like that with apartments upstairs. I don't know if the RFA people know this, but in the RFA law that they passed and the ordinance that they adopted is a special line that says mixed-use buildings will be treated as commercial buildings. So even though you have a small restaurant downstairs and 800 apartment units up above, you'll be treated as if you were a giant commercial building at a rate that goes up to a factor of 5 versus the 1.5 for the apartments. And so it's kind of anti the economic and urban planning process plan that the City of Olympia has, because that's built into the formula that they built that way. 1.5, yeah. If you're a small apartment owner and you have 5 units and you have 800 square feet for each, you're going to be paying a much higher rate than you would be for houses and or for a large apartment complex of 100,000, 200,000 square feet, which we have.
We have a question that.
Hold on.
I'm sorry.
I just wanted to rebut that a bit. While Pete Komet is not here, he is our engineering guy, and he has gone to TRPC several times and gotten the average apartment impact. So to answer your question, According to Pete's calculations, which is a different person doing calculations, the average apartment in Tumwater and Olympia would be impacted at somewhere between $3 and $9 a month to ensure that we have this RFA. They're making it sound like it's going to be hundreds of dollars a month the way they're speaking. We're only looking at potentially $3 to $9 a month.
Take that with a grain of salt. And you can go to our website and you can see what the real impacts are. It's substantial, and it is not $3 a month. I guarantee you that.
We have several questions about firefighter pay. I'll try to combine them. The first one is, what is the annual salary of firefighters? Same handwriting asks, how big are the pay increases that Tumwater and Olympia will get if the RFA passes? And compare the RFA pay schedule 2024 to the actual amounts paid in 2022 by the two cities, firefighter / paramedic and lieutenant.
So there's a lot of unknowns with this. We don't know yet. There's some assumptions for budgeting reasons that need to be in there. But the workers or the firefighters they are covered by unions, and the unions have to negotiate with the RFA for a contract. And those contracts are negotiated fairly, and those things have to be worked out with them. Now, firefighters we're not trying to do this or not backing this or endorsing this because we feel like we want more money and we want better benefits and things of that nature. We're not greedy. We're not. All we want is fair pay, fair benefits with this RFA. We're not asking for anything more than that. And that's what it is. So
you don't want to address the question of how much the firefighters are?
I mean, our salaries are public. I'm not giving any news out that isn't findable and discoverable. I mean, the top step salary of a firefighter in the city of Olympia is $107,000 a year in 2023.
Before overtime?
Yeah, that's your base salary. Before overtime, which overtime, that doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It means that we're understaffed and we don't have enough people. So that's where overtime comes in. But the base salary of a firefighter is $107,000. I've seen the pamphlets that our opposition has sent out that says that in the RFA, the new pay is going to be $178,000 for a firefighter. I mean, that is a total cost of compensation that may come based upon whatever our cost of living adjustments look like going into next year based upon CPI data.
So that's the loaded cost with health insurance and vacation benefits.
That's pension, that's benefits for families, that's our state pensions, that's everything that we make in an entire year that supports us and our families.
So the actual salary is lower than that?
Correct. The actual salary is $107,000.
The ads the city of Olympia is running to recruit more firefighters listed numbers in the 80s, 82,000, I think.
That's entry level. So our contracts have steps. You pay a new employee less than you pay a person that's been there for 5 years and more.
I think the question might be, Tumwater has about 30,000 people. Olympia currently has about 55,000 people.
Right.
The combined RFA would be serving a population of 85 or up to 92,000 people. Do the unions take that into account in their negotiations?
Yeah, so with negotiations, population size as well as assessed values of your response area are the two metrics that you use to determine who your comparables are to find like cities or departments that you compare with.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Sure.
Thank you.
So,
yeah, it's state law. Thank you, Bob.
I've got a spreadsheet. We've got the RFA spreadsheet here. The RFA spreadsheet is what the budget's based on. It's what their fire benefit charge is based on. And it's showing numbers, RFA rank pays. We're looking at, for a lieutenant, let's say, $129,000 in RFA rank pay. And then that grows because you have longevity pay of $8,000 on top of that. You have education incentive pay on top of that. You have special ops teams on pay for that. You have a base wage that ends up being about $140,000, just the base pay. The wages altogether, $140,000. Then you have holiday pay plus the annual benefits. You're looking at $200,000 for a lieutenant. There are increases in here. in the spreadsheet is a 6.85% increase for the fact that it's a bigger department. There are substantial increases for Tumwater's firefighters because they're paid less than Olympia firefighters, and they call that equity. And that equity increase makes the Tumwater firefighters much better off than they would be if they stayed in Tumwater. And all these things add millions of extra dollars to the cost. Millions of extra dollars that doesn't go towards hiring new firefighters or building new fire stations or buying new fire trucks. It is the cost of the RFA itself. The nature of the beast and the way they plan on negotiating the contracts. This is beyond inflation, by the way. Beyond the inflation's a separate category of adjustments on the spreadsheet. This is all before that. And so it's built into their negotiations as an expected expense, and it's what costs you some of that $10.5 million increase going in.
The average median income for a two-family member in Thurston County is $90,000. Let's put this in relative terms. These are the people that run into the building when we're running out. We should respect them with a living salary and a living wage. I see no problem with increasing Tumwater's firefighters because they're probably not making enough. They're probably even having to work to get to the average median income. And when we did the housing assessment last night, this is looking at being able to afford potentially $2,400, if you have a family, that's a couple bedroom apartment. For the folks that do this for us, I'm ashamed that you are actually taking this as not allowing them to have a living wage. No, it's a living wage for people who actually do the workforce, that do the CPR. Do you know how many people it takes to do CPR? 9 firefighters. The longest I've ever been able to do CPR is for 3 minutes, and I felt like I ran 10 miles. So these are professionals that deserve equal pay and a living wage and should be above our average median income for Thurston County.
And I'll rebuttal with that, yes, your numbers are accurate in the fact that we are 6% behind our comparables in the city of Olympia, and the 11% number is accurate for Tumwater. What you're not saying is what the unions have done to help support the RFA's creation is that the unions have agreed to spread those 6 and 11% market adjustments out over the first 6 years of the Regional Fire Authority. On day one of this RFA, we're not seeing a rapid increase of 6 and 11% on our paychecks. We have agreed to do this over the first 5 years so that it's not such a major impact. That's something that you're not going to hear.
Let me add something if I could. Try to be a little calm. We're not arguing against paying firefighters fairly. That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying are two things. One is we have the numbers are there. We're not guessing. The numbers are there. We have the numbers.
Answer the question.
The other thing is the question, and this is before the community, is if this is where we should focus our attention. Is this what we want to be doing? If the purpose of the RFA is to pay firefighters more, then say the purpose of the RFA is to pay, well, but that's what we're saying, that's what I'm saying. If that's what you're trying to do, Lisa, judging from what you're saying, if that's what you're trying to do, say that, and we will vote on whether we think that's good or not, or whether we think that's a priority. We're not arguing whether the value of the fire department or the value of firefighters. And we keep trying to make that point. That's not what we're talking about. It's about what's in front of us to vote on in a few weeks. And is that our priority for where we should be putting our money?
Yes, and I'll try not to be offended by what you said, Lisa. Because it isn't about, we're not saying that firefighters are undeserving of pay. $167,000 by a firefighter, total cost of compensation. They get deferred comp and all kinds of stuff on top of that. Maybe that's the wrong number. Maybe it should be higher. Maybe it should be 300,000. I don't know what the number is. What I'm saying is it's a big increase from where they're at now, right? And the budget reflects that. If you're saying they deserve more, then certainly the city of Olympia will have its labor negotiations at some point if the RFA doesn't pass, and they can provide that for them if that's what they believe, if that's what you believe. But to say that we think that they shouldn't have a living wage I'll take a page off of Steve, is offensive.
We have two questions that I don't completely understand, but I'll ask them anyway together. One of them is...
Hopefully we do.
Hopefully all of you do. How much more in reserve will the RFA have compared to the fire departments today? That's the first question. The second question is, can you speak to the fiscal security the RFA would bring to our fire and EMS response? Do you want to deal with them together or separately?
I can probably give some data on the reserve funding piece for at least the city of Olympia. It's been identified in the first budget cycle of this RFA, so the first 6 years, that by the end of that there will be $15 million in reserves to help fund station maintenance, apparatus replacement, critical equipment replacement. Currently, I believe the entire city of Olympia has 8 set aside for that.
There's $8 million now.
But that's citywide. That's not just fire department.
That's all the buildings.
All the buildings. So you'd be...
Okay.
Okay. Mr. Jezza.
Yeah, let Steve find those numbers, because I find the numbers not in those realms in the 7-year plan. Yes, well, here's what's really what you need to know about the reserve is that, as the consultant said, an RFA, this RFA in particular, stands on a quote-unquote narrow pile of money. That's a narrow pile that's unstable because it relies on fewer revenue sources than a general purpose level of government like a city. And we don't have to look any further than our West Thurston Regional Fire Authority. Part of this instability and risk is that it requires the voters to reauthorize it after 6 years. Without that reauthorization and without votes to increase the amount of money for the levy bond or for the FBC and after 7 years, we end up with a disaster. We end up with closing fire stations. You end up laying off people who, if they're not getting paid enough now, they'll get paid zero when they get laid off. And we're experiencing that now as a reality in our own county. So the risk from this proposal is manifold. And reserve, I guarantee you, Olympia has survived recessions and depressions. A fire department will survive even under tough times. Under the RFA, you can't count on that.
Okay.
I would like to address what we currently do in Olympia, which is, forgive me, city manager, because we talked about this at Finance Committee. We used to call it year-end funds. We now call it funds beyond policy, which is, the money that we have left over paying for policy. That's how we pay for fire trucks. That's how we pay for the equipment, the safety equipment. And we put $500,000, hopefully, into building repair, but that's all of the city's stock. So that's a very unstable way to pay for fire trucks, to pay for equipment. And granted, we'll have to do something about this if it fails, but this is not sustainable, and it is not a reserve to rely on the money we have left over after we pay for everything else to pay for the kind of equipment they need and the trucks for the future. So the RFA, right off the bat, provides for that. It is far better. It will be more stable, and you can rely on it instead of having a 6.9% inflation and not sure if you're going to have excess money after you pay for all your bills in the city. And you've got competing costs, parks, sidewalks, water, stormwater, sewer, you name it, streets. We have to pay for all that, homelessness, housing, and we have to divvy up that year-end funds to all of these competing charges. So no, right now, if the RFA comes in, we're 100% better.
To those of you in the audience, I warned you this would get complicated. Here's a question that I think calls out for some data. The question says, you call this a manufactured crisis. I believe this is for the people opposed. Do you believe that the PTSD claims, post-traumatic stress disorder claims, and on-the-job injuries due to increased call volume and job strain are manufactured? I think I'd like to ask if you have any data about PTSD claims and on-the-job injuries. Have they increased? When did they start increasing? How much have they increased?
I don't have the data for that question right here.
I can tell.
I know that they've increased.
Yes.
Yeah, in the last 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Do you have any comments, any data?
Well, first, if you repeat the question in terms of a manufactured crisis, no, there's no data that says it's a crisis. So I'm not sure what the questioner is asking.
One of the comments that was made by I don't remember who was somebody who was opposed to the RFA said this is a manufactured crisis.
Well, that was me. So that's fine. It's a manufactured crisis when we say that we are going to have inability to respond to emergency calls, that we have an inability to respond to emergency calls, and we know from my discussion, the conversation today from Lisa Parsley, we're not there yet. She's concerned about the future. The future might be that if trends continue in the way that she projects. Now, in terms of PTSD, I can't address that, but I do know that that is a real problem in firefighting and emergency professions, as well as in nursing, as well as in other healthcare professions, particularly so since the COVID crisis. So yeah, I'm not surprised if that would be a difficult issue that firefighters have to deal with.
So it's really not the question about PTSD and on-job injuries. It's how to make sure the cities have enough firefighters and that they're trained properly and that the equipment is there for them.
Well, the answer
is
to that
question,
one, the answer to that one is that we recruit. And if I recall correctly from the article in something called the JOLT, there were 400 applicants for the opening positions for Olympia's 18 new firefighters. 400 applicants. It sounds like there's enough interest in this profession, people who are dedicated to do it and get paid to do it, to fill those positions. We just need to have the right way of doing that.
So to the question, PTSD, don't have the data in front of me, but I will say that PTSD has increased over the last 30, 40 years in our service. More calls, worse calls, so worse type of calls. We are a service that is all hazard. So even though your data says 2% is fires and 4% in Tumwater, those numbers, actual numbers, keep going up, and that percentage goes down because there's more calls. Okay, sure. But fires are still happening, and more fires are happening each year. So you can have a percentage there, and that's fine. But PTSD happens because we see bad stuff, and people have a hard time dealing with it. And we have programs in place. Our members have programs in place to help deal with that. We have resources available to deal with that. So anecdotally, yes, it's going up. I can't tell you the data. Manufactured crisis. So wouldn't it be a lot better to take care of a problem that we see that's out there in front of us and take care of it now before it becomes a crisis, before it's broken, before it's a problem? And we have city officials that have told us, we have people that work on budgets, we have finance people that tell us that it's on the way, and it's on the way. So this is an option for us. This is an option for the public to consider to better provide the services that we can.
Right.
And I
appreciate that. My response to a manufactured crisis came from Councilmember Cooper's declaration that we are in a crisis. And I took exception to that fact that we're in a crisis. And it's true, we should act before there's a crisis, and we have the tools today without an RFA to more than adequately respond to it with a 50% vote, not a 60% supermajority required by the RFA. In fact, I have said to Lisa personally that if this RFA fails and it's shown that we actually need more revenue, I will sign up to support the levy lid lift. I will help campaign on it just as hard as I campaign for this, if it's shown that we actually need it. But this is the wrong way of doing it. The RFA is the wrong way, using the wrong financial tool.
And the last thing I'll say, I know there's more questions. We talked about this earlier, and there are 12 departments in Western Washington.
13.
There's 13. Mm-hmm. Are we counting east of the mountains?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
So 12 on this side. There's one east of the mountains. in a place that we never thought an RFA may excuse me, ever start. All those RFAs are doing well. They're financially well and use this same model. And this is not new. This is something that's been proven over time. It doesn't bankrupt cities. It doesn't bankrupt the community. It only helps the department grow, help the department grow.
That's a good segue into the next question, which I believe comes from a firefighter. It says, Lacey refused to join because they left the city and became a district, much like we want to be an RFA. They are thriving, referring to Lacey Fire District 3. It is not risky. They increased their overhead out of necessity. If Lacey and 13 regional fire authorities around the state have been successful, why would the Olympia Tumwater RFA not be successful?
I'd like to, should I handle that one? Or do you want to?
You spoke up first. There's opportunity for both sides.
You're on a roll. There you go.
I'm on a roll.
We're all going to talk.
Okay, so here's the fun part about budgeting, right? If you have a fire district and another fire district, or a fire district and a city, right? That fire district comes with all those overhead positions already in place. You actually get an economy of scale. If the city of Olympia and Tumwater joined with Lacey, you would have true efficiencies. But that's not the way it works. 1 and 1 don't make 2 when you're breaking up half of them from each jurisdiction. You end up with 3 jurisdictions with 3 budget directors and 3 HR people and 3 IT directors, and so it's by definition inefficient.
We already have 3 budget directors and 3. What are you talking about? Are you talking about
an RFA? An RFA would be the 3rd budget director. You'd have an Olympia, Tumwater, and an RFA. Most of the RFAs around the state have come from mergers that include already existing fire districts. So they get true efficiencies there.
And they were formed at some point in time.
They were formed, but many of them, most of the RFAs do not have a fire benefit charge. One thing they're not telling you. Most of them do not have a fire benefit charge. Yeah. And this fire benefit charge, by the way, while it was said by one person at a meeting, it's tried and true. And the answer is not tried and true. These fire benefit charges has never been litigated in court. They have never been validated as being legitimate in terms of the benefit formula. And so it is not tried and true and is subject to a challenge, which is incredibly risky for it.
Now I forgot the question. Can you restate the question?
The question was essentially, if 13 RFAs have been successful, why wouldn't this one be?
I would say that it would be, just like the other RFAs.
I figured you would.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess I would say it hasn't been litigated because it works. It works, and it's in state law, and they follow what state law states. And so you shake your head no, but it's working, and it's happening all over the place.
It's not what the state law says. I talked with the legislative staff who have the regional fire authority under their jurisdiction in the state legislature. I asked them about the square root of the square feet and the fire flow formula that's being used in these RFAs. And they said, what? There's nothing in there for that. What is in there is assessed valuation. And they were shocked to find out about this formula being used. So it is surprising, but yes, I'll agree with you. The other part of that it is being used.
So I think it will be successful. I think the RFA plan wants to follow state law, wants to follow what's out there, wants to follow what other departments or other RFAs have done and how they've been successful, and we want to try that.
I think we're conflating 2 issues. One is the existence of the Regional Fire Authority, and the other is the fire benefit charge that the Regional Fire Benefit Authority could assess. And what Mr. Jezza was referring to was the complicated formula that's different from, I believe, all the other 13 RFA, the other 13.
No, it's the exact same as all the other 13 RFAs. There is no difference between those and this one. And the reason why this RFA Planning Commission ended up with the formula that they have now. Sure, there's other variables that come with the formula, whether that be risk factors, all of the other, and
right now there's no risk factors in the fire benefit charge, right?
No, there will be fire sprinklers, there's also
there's
some offsets for
deductions, yes.
deductions to try to equalize the smaller and
Yeah.
larger commercial as well as buildings.
But they're not in the formula now. How would they be created later?
They're in there.
It's a discount. So it's
a
not
discount.
part of the formula. It's
Not an
you do the formula and then there's a discount, whatever it kicks out.
If you go to the Valley Regional Fire Authority, which was one of the first ones that were created, they have a hazard factor in there. A hazard factor such as if you have a building that contains compressed natural gas cylinders, for example, you get charged a higher rate. If you have flammable materials, if the building's made out of flammable materials, if it's in proximity with other buildings, it has a higher rate because it's a greater danger for firefighters to put out, requires more fire trucks and more specialized resources to be able to put them out. That's recognized. That's what the fire benefit charge science calls for. It is not, precisely not, what the RFA is proposing in this RFA proposal. Everything is charged the same. A warehouse that holds fireworks made out of wood is charged at the same rate as one made out of brick that houses nothing but water bottles. That is not fire science, and it is a real shortfall that was recognized by one of the fire chiefs in your conversations, and it was never addressed. In
Well,
fact,
luckily we
the
don't have any
consultant suggested
fireworks
doing it too.
stops at Olympia,
The
so
consultant
that's
suggested
nice.
doing it too.
So I guess I would say that we have a plan in place for this, and that plan can grow. It can grow to the point that the Valley Regional Fire Authority is at. So it can take incremental steps over time to get there. And we know that that their plan's there, and we can get to that point over time. And so starting from day one, we're going to have this or year 2, year 3, year 4. That may look different when it comes to what hazards are in those buildings, what other discounts we may be able to give. Those things can come over time.
May I?
If you do it quickly, we still have several questions left in
All
10
right, well,
minutes.
I'll be quick. I think part of it comes back to the question you're asking whether this will be successful. But how do you want to define success? The success means being able to raise $10.5 million in the first year and go up to $40 million in out years. That's success. So if you give a budget, there's a lot of room in that. There's a lot of ability to continue to raise money. That may be how you want to define success. Or you may want to define success differently. Is how efficiently can you support the fire departments for less money and get more people on the streets? So, it's a tricky question.
Let me ask a more direct question then. We talked about balancing factor a couple of minutes ago. How would the Regional Fire Authority Board determine the fire benefit charge, and is there a limit to the increases of this fee?
I believe the equation's already been established as far as the planning committee and what the vote will bring.
I think this question is
but-
about the 60-40 rule.
Right.
Right.
And so the fire benefit charge can only create a max of 60% of the overall budget of the fire authority. So you can increase it up to that 60% threshold to recoup those costs, but nobody in any of these 13 RFAs that have created this with the fire benefit charge have done so.
They haven't done so?
They have increased their fire benefit charge.
But not to 60%.
No, they stay away from hitting the margins of the 60%.
Okay.
Your clock isn't working.
Right.
The clock is stopped.
Yeah, and your elected officials are the ones who are in charge of raising that if it needs to be done.
We have about 6.5 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
This next question might be more appropriate for an Olympia City Council meeting, but it's interesting, so I'll ask. The Olympia City Council is considering annexation of the urban growth area in the southeast corner of Olympia. That would add some 7,900 people and likely a new fire station. Can Olympia move forward with the annexation if the RFA doesn't pass?
We're in the process of discussing that. So at this point, I don't know when or if it will occur. It is going to be coming back to either the Finance Committee or the Land Use and then to Council at this point. This is not a simple process to annex 7,900 people. And so at this point, we're not sure when this is going to happen or if it will. And it is separate of the RFA.
Would the annexation require building a new fire station?
If we were alone, we'd have to take it up. But let me just go to the RFA. If by increasing our efficiency and merging the two departments, we can cover the fire services better, and if we can delay one fire station, building a fire station, for even a couple years, it more than offsets the $10 million for administration. It more than offsets that. If we have to build a new fire station and we have an RFA, we can put it in the most appropriate place for both cities, which increases our efficiency once more. If Olympia has to go alone, we may not put it in the best place for covering Tumwater at all. I think the RFA is the best way to reduce the number of fire stations and potentially delay it long enough that we can actually get back some of our costs.
So the study that the city commissioned, to actually follow up on an original study, definitely had the RFA on its mind when they looked at the annexation. This was an annexation study. And the takeaway from that report is on one chart, and that chart says, without an RFA, the city of Olympia will be collecting $71 million less than it has to pay out in additional services for that annexation. But with the RFA, here's two columns, with and without, but with the RFA, the city of Olympia stands to gain $11 million over that same period of time. So a swing from a negative 70 to a positive 11, it's quite a bit of money difference. It's certainly, the annexation is a pivotal consideration in any choice that the city makes. Otherwise, they wouldn't have commissioned the study that way.
I mean, it seems appropriate to evaluate both sides of that conversation when a vote for a major critical service of your department or city is about to leave, so that's a moot point.
Yeah, and I beg to differ. We've been talking about annexation since I got on council in 2018 when I was sworn in. So this is not revolving around the RFA.
No,
not at all. I just want to point that out. And we're not sure when this is going to happen and all the details with this. That's a significant thing for our city to do. And just be,
The study, you're familiar with the study, though?
Oh, yeah.
I apologize to those of you who asked questions we weren't able to get to. This will be the last question. It comes in two parts, a long and a short. If this proposition fails, when and how much would you expect an increase of city levy dollars? How much would you have to ask for in a levy lid lift? And the short question is, what happens if this does not pass? And we have 2 minutes left.
Yeah. We're here on behalf of the Vote Yes campaign for the formation of a regional fire authority with what's being presented tonight. I don't think any of us are in a position to answer what will happen if this doesn't pass right now, because that's a whole nother conversation that is not encompassed in this plan that we're here talking about tonight. So none of us have an answer for that.
And I just will add that it's very complex if it doesn't pass. The city is not just beholden to the fire department. We have the police department and all the other services. That's a very complex conversation, and it's going to take us time. So we can't answer that.
Okay. Mr. Cole.
A number of us have had conversations about this, and a number of us on our side have said, a good proposal, we'll be happy to support it. We understand frankly, we understand quite thoroughly a lot of the problems that you're having and a lot of the pressures, especially with budgetary concerns that you've got, the pandemic, the homeless. We understand that. Our problem is purely this particular proposal. We're a generous community. We support our schools. We support 911. We have a long history of doing that when we're presented with a good proposal and a reasonable proposal. I think if that was forthcoming, I know myself, and we've talked about that, would be happy to support that.
Well, let that be the last word. Thank you very much to our speakers, to our audience, to the League of Women Voters, and especially to Thurston Community Media. I appreciate your being here. Thank you.